Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. We've had all sorts of guests on the podcast, but I don't think we've ever had a genuine rock star. Today's guest has a fascinating story to tell. If you want to know what it's like being part of not just one, but two of the country's most successful rock bands, well, today's guest is going to take us into that world. He toured the country and the world playing in those bands. It was a wild time, and the temptations that come with the rock and roll lifestyle were there for the taking. If you know anything about Australian rock history, you would have heard of the band Divinyls. It was headed up by the charismatic female singer Chrissy Amphlett, who was the wild child of the rock world. Well, today's guest was the bass player in the band at the height of their success. It was a crazy ride, but today's guest had a secret, one that he was ashamed of and hid from the band. He was a heroin addict. The drug had got hold of him to the point either he had to clean himself up or he would have died with a needle in his arm. He left the band and then checked himself into rehab to kick the addiction. Today we're going to hear his incredible story. Not only did he beat his habit, he got his shit sorted out and was given another opportunity in the music industry. He joined the Hoodoo Gurus band, which enjoyed local and international success. What I find interesting and inspirational about today's guest, who I might add has been inducted into the Australian Rock Hall of Fame not once but twice, is the fact his achievements in the music industry is not what he's most proud of. What rocks his boat now is that he's living a good life and trying to help others, using his own experiences to help them fight their own addictions. I've caught up with him a couple of times prior to recording this podcast, and I think you're going to really enjoy this chat. He's a cool dude, humble guy who has a great outlook on life. Rick Grossman, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thanks, mate.
It is good having you on.
Very nice of you. Very generous.
Well, I must admit I'm a little bit in awe.
Well, vice versa. I mean, I've got bad imposter syndrome at the moment being here.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because we've caught up a few times, and I think it was a funny meeting. We were introduced by a mutual friend of ours, Ken Gamble, who I think's the world's best private investigator.
Fantastic.
And he was
Great
a
man.
Previous guest on that, so a shout out to Ken Gamble. But he brought us together, and it's funny when you sit down and I'm the ex-cop, and I don't know how you describe me now, I'm a podcaster, and you're the rock star, the former heroin addict, and everything else. Our lives take different paths, but we shared a similar outlook when we sat down and got to have a chat, didn't we?
Yeah, no question. No question. When I was back in the rehab, I got into the rehab, and my background, there's no violence or crime in my background. I grew up in a warm home, silent home, but when I was in the rehab, there was a bloke in there who had the complete opposite background to me.
Yeah,
he had a lot of violence in his life, and we just bonded.
Yeah,
he and I. We became very, very close friends. And, nothing in common really, except feelings. The feelings were common, and it's funny. I think I said to you the other day, I used to see you on the news and stuff before you had this podcast, and I think that guy he's obsessive. And
yeah.
he's driven, because I am too.
Yeah.
I related to it.
Some people have called me other things, but I'll take obsessive and
Same here, mate.
and driven. But it's funny, isn't it? Because the person you are is not defined by what you do when
Absolutely.
It's all said and done. And that's where, I think the interesting thing for me, sitting down and speaking to you, I see you on stage and all that, and I'm thinking, this is from a person from another world. I can't relate. And it was funny, you sitting down and you're going, boy, what's it like, investigating a homicide? And I'm thinking, forget that. What was it like when you met Mick Jagger or performing in front of a sold-out stadium?
Yeah.
That type of thing. So it's interesting that different perspectives that we can have on life.
Totally different, yeah. Sam Neill.
Yeah, the actor.
Yeah, he's a friend of my friend Jimmy Barnes, and I was at a thing one night, and they'd been to the ARIA Awards.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to meet up with them afterwards, and Sam said to me, were you there? And I said, no, I didn't go. I said, I don't really like going to the ARIA Awards. And he said, what? It's fantastic, I said, I'd like to go to the Academy Awards. He said, oh, no, you don't want to go to that. It's boring, so it's everyone's.
It's different perspectives, isn't it?
I'd love to go to the Dally M Awards,
Yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? And you're a football tragic too. That's something that I learnt. So,
well, when I met you, I said, the last time I was nervous meeting someone was Wally Lewis. So.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we're in the heart of South Sydney, and I think that sits well with you too, doesn't it?
It does very well, yeah.
All right.
When I was a kid, I used to wait for the Garbos to come. They were all the South's team.
That's right. That's where they were employed. Yeah. It's funny how the games changed now. But let's talk about your upbringing. So you said that you had a fairly normal upbringing. There wasn't anything extraordinary, but there was something. And
there was something. Yeah.
We'll talk about that because I know you've brought it up in the past, and even in our conversations that. Your father left when you were relatively young, and that sort of left an impression on you. It
did, even when I think about it, I talk about it now. I can feel it. I used to ring. He just disappeared one day. Yeah, just didn't come home, and my parents, they were from England, and there was a different world, and you didn't talk about your feelings.
Yeah,
and my mother, with best intentions, tried to keep my sister and I away from what was happening. My father actually had trauma from the Second World War. I found out much later, and he suffered from depression, which could, nowadays, easy to treat.
People would diagnose and have some treatment for
it. He basically had a breakdown and just left, and I didn't see him for a couple of years. And I used to ring up the airlines, Ansett and TAA, and ask them for their passenger lists if they had him on the passenger list. Yeah, and
how old were you when he
13.
left? Yeah, okay, that's a difficult time to have your father go out of your life.
Yeah, I used to imagine, fantasize about him coming in the door, and my sister grew up in the same home.
Yeah,
she is not an alcoholic or an addict. She processed the trauma in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny when I talk about trauma. I mean, people I know, what they've been through is mine.
I understand what you're saying because I've sat opposite people here in this room, and some of their stories, I'm thinking, amazing. Well, I have got nothing to whinge about in life. And some of the people I've spoken to and actually said that what I've been through pales into insignificance, and made the point that, well, it's all relative and it's how you feel. If it impacts on you, it's still a significant event in your life. And,
that's right. It's relative.
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who went through terrible trauma, child abuse, but they're not addicts.
Yeah.
They didn't end up addicts. They somehow found their way out of it without, that path. I remember shutting down.
Yeah.
My sister got expelled from every school, ran away, got in trouble with the police. That's how she processed it.
Right.
I didn't. I went quiet.
Yeah.
And started living in my head and fantasized about being in another family, fantasized about being somewhere else. And felt really invisible.
Is that just a sign of the times where, that type of thing, you just don't talk about it, whereas today we might have more open dialogue?
I think so. Schools I went to, well, the first guy went to a private school, and, it was like a gladiator academy. You would never talk about stuff. And I think back then also, to be from a family that's separated, parents who've split, was a bit of a no-no.
Yeah.
And, I'd see, parents, we were talking about the other day, people who've been together for, 40 years and they hate each other, but they stay together. And, I remember going to school and trying to talk to, like, the school. It wasn't even a counsellor. It was a guy who was kind of a teacher at school about what was going on in my family. And he just said to me, I was trying to get out of class.
Yeah. A lot of damage can be done in those formative years.
Oh, mate. And, being a parent, the great thing about bringing kids up with a different path to what I was on, I was always very present for my kids.
Yeah.
And I think that I have a great relationship with them.
It's funny, isn't it? And I know with my kids, my father and my mother, but my father raised me strict and very stoic in the conversations. And you try to change that, you learn. Okay, well, it didn't quite work for me. Maybe I might adjust it a little bit.
Yeah.
But the music, was that just a form of escapism? You were saying that you're in your head a little bit. What was
absolutely? And I remember my dad actually when he never came back to our home, but he appeared again, and I remember my mother taking my sister away on a trip to try and it was all about let's try and figure out what's going on with my sister, and I stayed here in Sydney with my dad. And he brought these records home, they were Beatles records, and I'd listened to the Beatles, but it was Sgt. Pepper, and there was a lot of sort of psychedelic music, and there was the musical Hair, and I don't know, I just started to listen. Look, I'll go back a little bit. When I was really young, when I was 5, I used to get the night terrors, and my parents bought me a radio.
Right, a little transistor radio.
Well, no, it was actually a big
one
thing,
of those big
Bakelite things. And even now, I joke when I hear songs like Under the Boardwalk by the Stones or Waterloo Sunset, the Kinks. It reminds me of being in pajamas and lying in bed listening to these songs, in the dark.
And it just got into your head.
Yeah, and it's certainly, my parents, they had music on in the house when I was younger, classical music and some musicals, and I don't know where. I guess that's it was planted a seed in me somewhere. And I found that music was healing.
Yeah.
It sounds corny to say it, but it was. And around that time when my dad had left and had come back, I started to really escape into. I'd listen to music and put headphones on, and I'd feel better.
That was your world.
Yeah. Yep. And I started playing guitar, and I guess I saw it as a way out of being invisible.
Yeah.
A way out of going, hey, I'm here. And so
that you wanted to be, I'll just expand on that a bit, the way of stopping you being invisible, like, this is what I do. I might not be talking, but this is
and wanting to be noticed.
Okay.
And I used to look at famous people like footy players or musicians, and I'd think, but their life's fine, because people love them.
Yeah.
And,
you were saying that the other day. You went, as a teenager, you went to see Led Zeppelin play here in Sydney.
I did, yeah.
Which must have been an incredible experience. But you look at that and think, these people must have all their shit together. There's not a problem in the world. Look at them. They are on top of their game, but it's not always the case, as you found out.
Yeah, I found out. Sure, I found out, and you see a band on stage, you don't see the other 23 hours of what happens in a musician's life.
Yeah,
and Keith Richards puts it a good way. We're the ones who are working when everyone's having fun, and then when we finish, everyone's gone home.
Yeah,
it's kind of true. I found that I was good at playing a guitar. I played violin and cello when I was younger, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And when my parents sort of gave up trying to make me learn something, I picked up a guitar, and I kind of got quite good at it quite quickly.
Yep.
To my surprise, and I became driven and obsessive with it.
I would imagine like an instrument, there would always you could aim higher. Like you could get to a level and go, okay, I want the next level. So
the other funny thing, when you're like 15 and an adult is speaking to you, you don't quite often don't pay any attention. No. And my godmother, who was an actress, who I loved, she said, I still remember her saying it. She said, if you're going to be a musician, the most important thing is to have your own style.
Right.
You can be technically great, that's all good, but you've got to have your own thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why in my 15-year-old brain, I really took notice of that. And And I became kind of neurotic about having my own thing a few later on, and it got me into all these great bands having my own thing pretty much, because there are a lot of people who are technically a lot better than me.
Yeah, you were saying that the other day, that people could identify your style. You had a style about the way that you played your guitar.
Yeah, and I mean, the general public, probably not. It wouldn't mean anything. But within the community, our community, musical community, it was good.
And you also, part of your fascination with music, but you also had this strong desire to be part of a band.
Oh, mate, a gang. Maybe it's come from the family splitting up and stuff, but I just wanted to be part of a gang.
Yeah.
And,
just a tight little crew.
Oh, mate, I really wanted that. And, I've been fortunate where I've been, a part of a few now. Yeah. All different, incredibly dysfunctional, some of them, or most of them. You learn when to stand up for yourself, when it's better to just shut up, when it's, you can... there's all sorts of stories about that.
Yeah.
You've had that too.
But I would imagine with a band, you got people that they'd be passionate, they'd be emotional, and so there's a volatility that would come in that environment and the pressure and all that. So I'm sure you've seen some interesting characters.
Oh yeah. When I started playing, I played with people who were older than me.
Yeah.
In Sydney in the 70s, mid-70s, when I was leaving school, all I wanted to do was get an amplifier and a guitar, and I got jobs and did that. And I met people, like-minded people, and we had this sort of there were rehearsal rooms down the end of Oxford Street in Sydney, and a scene sort of started there, a lot of people rehearsing there. And I played with these guys, a bunch of guys who were from the north side for about a year, and that's where I first tried heroin, actually, with them. Yeah. And they were older than me. But, I still had this thing in me. I didn't pay that much attention to it, to the heroin. It was like I was smoking pot and taking acid, and everyone was doing that. And it was just a part of my life then, the drugs and alcohol. And because I was driven, I was so obsessed with.
So you hadn't broken into the music industry, but you were hanging around the peripheral of it. You were starting to feel your way and observing others, and you wanted to get into a band. When I have cops on here, or even the crooks, I ask the crooks how they got into crime. I ask the cops how and why they got in there. Yeah. How'd you get into your first band?
Well, it was funny, I don't want to get too ethereal here, because I'm a cynic, as I said. But at the end of 1976, God, it seems like such a long time ago. I was going to visit a family friend in Melbourne, and she rang me and she said, "Bring your bass down to Melbourne. You should go and have a play with this band." And it was a band called the Bleeding Hearts. I'd never heard of them, and I remember going to the airport and I bought a music magazine. There's an article on the band. I went down there, went and had a play with them, and they were older than me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, that they were a popular inner city band in Melbourne.
Yep.
I knew one person in Melbourne. And, I didn't have a lot of life experience.
And how old were you, did you say? That was
20, 21.
Yeah, it's a big...
Yeah, it was, and they said to me, I went and had a play with them, and they said, "Oh, well, we've got 6 gigs a week.
Yeah.
Do you want to join?" And logistically, I was living in a place in Sydney. I had a job, I was picking up classes in a pub. But you're
getting paid.
Yeah. And, and the ethereal thing I was saying, I've had it a few times in my life. It's like almost a tangible voice.
Yeah.
Saying to me, your life's about to change.
Yeah.
And, I like that about life, about taking risks. Yeah. And so I did. I said, yeah. I knew nobody. And I'm all of a sudden in cars with these guys who I didn't know. And
there's a bit of trust and just accepting the fate. This is my direction. Yeah.
But what there were, I've had a few mentors in my life. One guy in that band was a guy called Martin Armiger, who was a brilliant songwriter, and he ended up writing lots of soundtracks.
Yeah.
But he was in a band called The Sports. But he said this great thing to me. He said he was kind of like this very charismatic guitar hero guy, and he wasn't all that interested in being friends with me, So I'm like trying to make, like me, and he's teaching me a song, and I'm just playing all over this song, trying to impress him.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "Well, Rick, we all know you can do that now. How about just learning the song?" And it changed the way I looked at music.
Yeah.
That comment.
Yeah.
To looking at a song and being part of a song instead of being
changing the mindset. I understand what you're saying.
Being part of, and it's all about being part of something, something bigger, and that was great. I ended up living down there for 3 years, and I had so many. I mean, I lived in a house with this crazy house with Paul Kelly and the heroin people living in the house, junkies and all sorts of stuff, and it was magnificent.
And that I understand that lifestyle that at those times it was you were on the no money, just living day to day, scrounge what you can, and it
was fun. Yeah, it was fun, and
you look back at it now. You had the energy to do that back then. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be doing it now, but you were starting off, and you had ambitions, and that was that around the period of time with the rock bands in the pubs and that rock scene.
So that was it was starting to really happen. Late 70s, or mid 70s, it was happening, and I mean when I lived in Melbourne, all the bands I played in 3 bands down there. We were constantly playing.
Yeah.
And, quite often supporting Skyhooks or Sherbet or Cold Chiseled, Split Ends, bands that were around constantly. And the pub scene was big in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And, it was fantastic. It was, I like to think of the time in Melbourne as what I learned, what not to do in a band. I mean, oh mate,
a bit rough and ready.
Oh mate, and
that was one of the stories you told me. I was laughing about. I think I've got it right. Where there was a during that period of time where you had a friend who was on heroin, and you're trying to get her out of a place, and some tough, hard-ass looking dude, when you've knocked on the door and said, "There's such and such here. Who the fuck are you?" "Oh, that's right. You're the musician. Do you like your hands?"
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good threat. And if you like your hands, don't turn up here again. But I love the punchline to that you told that to the writer of Animal Kingdom.
Yeah. Oh, well, to Ben Mendelsohn, who played...
Oh, the actor. Yeah.
He's an old friend, and he told me a few years ago that he used that story in that film.
That line.
Because the guy was so friendly
to
me at first. "Oh, Rick, you're the muso. Oh, yeah, it's great. Yeah, oh, great." And he just turned. And you said you've seen it.
That's what I laughed about it, because he would just see you coming in there, and he's just going to carve you up, and you're not even going to know about it, but you'll know there was a horrendous threat made against you.
Yeah.
But that's the instinct they got, like hard-ass, crooks that have been around know how to put the fear of God into a young muso like yourself wandering in trying to do the right thing. But
well, I found out, I mean, I knew who he was at the time, but, being a bit of a crime, Australian crime fanatic, I found out, his name was Peter Allen, and he was quite notorious.
He might have carried out his threat. He wouldn't be playing the guitar.
No.
Trump.
I mean... But I mean, it was a great time, but I always wanted to come back here to Sydney.
Yeah. And, just on that, it sounds like you're surrounded by a lot of creative people. If you're talking Paul Kelly and the whole scene, so you would have had a lot of interesting people,
mate. When I went down there, like I said, I was obsessive. I still am, but I was obsessive about music, and before I went to Melbourne, I'd go and see every band.
Yeah.
So a band like Skyhooks, You know,
Yeah,
I
they
had
were
that thing
huge.
of watching Skyhooks and thinking, those guys, they're rock stars, look, you know, they've got this incredible thing, you know. So when I went to Melbourne, I think, you know, you carry memories, great memories to your deathbed. You know, I'll always remember this, where I'd gone to Melbourne, got asked to join this band, had no idea really who they were.
Yeah.
And after about a week, we did this gig in the city in Melbourne, in Richmond, and the dressing room was full of all those guys, Skyhooks and, you know, Ross Wilson from Daddy Cool, all these people, and they're all coming up to me going, "Oh, great, mate, you know, good, welcome." And it was the best day of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I just couldn't believe it.
Did you feel like at that point in time, was that where you felt like you've been accepted, or did you just...
Noticed.
Right, okay.
Noticed.
Yeah.
You know, important. It was important.
But that would be pretty cool if that was your dream and you're seeing it sort of starting to point in the right direction. But what behind that, with all the work that is done, that's very professional of me. I didn't turn my phone off. The amount of work that you had to put in to get to that level. Like you talk, we see you up there doing the gig and thinking, that's cool, look, you can play the guitar, but you would have had to be obsessive to get the skill and talent to really hit the right mark to get accepted by those guys.
I think most people, you know, who I know who are musicians have that.
Yeah.
You know, and I teach at a uni and you know, I see that missing with a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, because you have to be like that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you have to go through a lot of stuff, you know, and it gets hard and it's easy, you know, you'd give up if you weren't driven.
It's interesting you say that. You look at people, because you could relate that to other areas like sport. The people that make it, I don't think you'd have any idea to get to that top level how much effort they've put in. And, I see that at a lesser scale, or not lesser, just a different field, but with homicide, people want to be a homicide detective. You have no idea how hard I worked to...
I saw it in you, you know?
Yeah, you had to be driven to get to where you wanted.
Yeah.
But so you're down in Melbourne, you started to realise, okay, this might be the way that I can... earn a living and make a career out of this. But you were saying before I interrupted you that you had a desire to get back to Sydney.
I did, yeah. I guess, I wanted to come back and I was given the opportunity to come back, and it's quite funny, you know. My friend, who's my closest friend, is Rob Hurst, who plays in Midnight Oil.
Yep.
He's like my brother, Rob, and we became friends in 1977. And he used to, every time I'd go to Sydney in a band, he'd be there.
Yeah.
He was just like, you know, he just same as me. You know, he wanted to hear everything, everybody. And he said to me, it's 1979. I was in a great band, and I was really, you know, it was good. But he said to me, how would you like to play in Midnight Oil? We get $300 a week. I remember him saying that. And
I'll let you meant to go like that. $1 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to which I, you know, did what I have done, not so much lately, but I used to do is jump at the spur of the moment and change my whole life.
Yeah.
You know, which is what I did. And I left the band I was in and came straight up to Sydney.
Yeah.
And went and saw Rob and said, great. And he's like, we haven't actually parted ways with our bass player.
You jumped the gun a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he said, best thing you could do is to try and do something for a month or so. And I in that month, Ivor Davies from Icehouse, he said, there's this great band in Sydney called Matt Finish. And Matt Finish need a bass player for 4 weeks. It was almost like a god job, you know. It was like, okay. And same thing, I went away with these guys I didn't know. Again, different this time. I had to go. Their bass player was sick. We went up to Coolangatta for a residency. I didn't know them. And their singer, Matt Moffat, his name is, Extraordinary talent.
Yeah.
One of these, my what does my wife calls them crazy creatives?
Yeah.
You know, so most people are kind of mad. You know,
Yeah.
people who write music and
They're on
music,
the edge of the spectrum.
and he was definitely on the edge.
Yeah.
You know, and I just fell in love. I thought it was just,
Yeah.
and the way I played, his songwriting, there was just this kind of magic thing that happened, and I stayed in that band.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that was Midnight Oil got a new bass player.
Yeah.
And I went to the first gig, of his down in Wollongong with Rob. And after the show, Rob said, "Oh, we've got to drive you back to Sydney. We've had a call from your family, and my dad passed away."
Oh, right. Okay.
And it really sort of pulled us together. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing about that, you do things in your life and you don't sort of go through life going, "Oh, I'm so full of fear, I better do this," or it's not a conscious thing. But it's interesting, when my dad passed away, that was when my drug use really accelerated.
Yeah.
Around that time. And I remember going to his funeral and didn't cry. And I wondered why I didn't cry. And it was sort of like
suppressed or
it was I don't know. I'd shut down so much. I think, earlier on that I don't know. I wasn't really open to that sort of emotional connection.
I see a lot of myself. I've lost my father. We all deal with it differently and struggle in our own ways, and it's something that's sort of quite confronting. But I think from my point of view, it doesn't matter what age. All of a sudden, you are the man of the. Before you had someone that you looked up to or someone that sat above, and it's almost like, well, you're now the man, and so it affects people in different ways. I think.
I mean, my mother had met someone in 1976.
Yeah.
75. And I was very fortunate. He was my stepdad. And he was a magnificent person.
Oh, that's
great person. And took my mother, who was a eastern suburbs sort of woman, and took her to, he was a bushie.
Yeah.
And he took her to North Queensland.
Yeah.
And they bought a boat up in North Queensland, a charter boat.
Yeah. It's a life change.
Didn't wear shoes for 3 years or something, but incredible, great man. But this is a funny little thing I think about. They said to me in 1978, when I got threatened by that guy, I'd gotten quite sick physically.
Yeah.
And I'd gone up there and worked on the boat
for
about 3 months to get my health back and got fit. And they said, "Why don't you stay here?
Yeah.
You can get your skipper's ticket. You get a great job here, driving the big boats, and you have this lifestyle."
Yeah.
It's like, sounds good, but nah, I'm going to go back to this crappy little room in Melbourne with no money.
Yeah.
And,
But, and I think often people that achieve follow their passion don't take the easy path, because that would have been a pretty tempting path.
It was.
Of, all right, the weather's warm on a
Beautiful.
boat, laid back, no pressure, that type of thing. But, you had a passion that you were following.
Absolutely. And, and it's driven me to here.
Yeah.
I played in that band Matt Finish for 2 years, and this is when I saw that there was a lot of heroin in Sydney.
Yeah.
And everyone started to dabble. Now, when someone says dabble in heroin, I don't know how successful in dabbling in heroin is,
I haven't met many dabblers in heroin.
No.
It grabs you.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that sort of saved me a little bit was we're always travelling.
Yeah.
We're always away somewhere. And I'd come back home and things have got a little bit more out of control with my social, my friends and people are starting to turn, their personalities are changing, and that band split up in 1981.
Yep.
In a hail of drugs and just dysfunction.
It became dysfunctional because of the addictions
Well, Matt, our singer, he's sort of a bit more than eccentric.
Yeah.
I mean, today they might say he's a bit Asperger's but he was brilliant, but completely irrational. I think I think that, we all used to take acid
Yeah.
in the early days, and I think something might have really
that can
him.
stuff people up, can't it?
But I loved him, and I really loved him, and but it became untenable. And back then, you'd have roadies who worked for you, who were like guys from prison.
Yeah.
They were there pretty much to protect the band.
They were the bouncers as well as the roadies. And,
So, nowadays it's so professional, and they've got unions and all sorts of stuff. But and no one would ever drink at a gig now. But back then and everyone was taking drugs and speed, a lot of speed, and we'd get in the car, we'd play in Melbourne, and get in the car after the gig and drive all night back to Sydney.
Yeah.
On those they weren't freeways, and they were, and I got taught how to overtake. Someone actually had to teach me how to overtake on a highway at night. Yeah. And when I think about it, it's just, but you do a line of speed, get in the car and drive home.
Drive for 10 hours.
Oh, nuts. And after a year and a half, our road crew started, everyone was getting paranoid. They was carrying a shotgun in the truck.
This ain't going to end in tears.
Oh, mate. Just, another moment I'll always remember is I read this book called Dispatches. Dispatches is about Vietnam. Yeah. It's a great book. And I'm sitting in a hotel in Ballina, and everyone's like, there's paranoia and all this tension, and there were fist fights in the band and all this stuff going on. And I'm reading this stuff in this book about American soldiers shooting themselves in the foot to be sent home.
To get out, yeah.
And I actually thought I could bash my hand with a hammer and I'd go home.
Great logic going on there.
Well, and I loved the band. I loved playing, but it was like this psychodrama that was going on. And look, we made a great album. The album did really well. We got a gold record for it, and we're getting big crowds, and it was all great. But within the band, it was too intense, and it just imploded. And I went and worked on the boat for about 3 months after that, and then got a call about the Divinyls.
Yeah, now talk us about the Divinyls, because that would have been they were the band there for a long time, weren't they?
So the Divinyls, when they started, they used to play with us in that finish. They used to support us, and whenever they'd be supporting us, in the pubs around Sydney, Bayview Tavern or Family Inn and Rydalmere, or the places where we used to play, we'd all get there early to watch Chrissy. Yeah. I just thought, we all just thought she's gorgeous, beautiful, and I thought they were a great band. They were really early days for them. And I came back to Sydney, and they had this manager. He was a very passionate man. He was driven as well, very driven. And he called me and he said, will you come? Oh, that's right, I was in Melbourne. He said, do you want to come up and have a play with the band? They'd like you to come and have a play. And so I did, and it was, another story. It's like it worked really well, and personality-wise, it was great. And there was the world of Countdown was big, and so all of a sudden we're on Countdown making film clips, and we're on these out playing with Cold Chisel and the Angels.
It might have been before around that time, Monkey Grip, the movie as well.
That's right.
That's right. Chrissy was on that in the song, so that was a fairly big movie. Yeah,
they had the Boys in Town out as a single. Now I joined just when that was happening. Yeah, they parted ways with their bass player, and and it was funny being all of a sudden being in this world, but at the same time.
So does it go in levels, like you talk Matt Finish and then Divinyls? Is that go, and not talking the
popularity?
Not talking the talent or that. It's just a different level of exposure that you get.
When I joined the Divinyls, I think probably Matt Finish would have been a little bit more popular.
Right. Okay.
At the time. But the Divinyls just sort of suddenly, with Boys in Town, and we did a lot of shows with being taken out to the big pubs with Midnight Oil, or the Angels, playing to those audiences. And we were talking about it the other day, terrifying.
Yeah, talk us about some of those, because I like the Chrissy takes offence at someone saying something and jump in the crowd, and you guys have got to drag her out. And,
Oh, mate. She was, people back then, it was a very male-orientated industry, and female singers were fairly cute and demure, and, And I think it's interesting. Chrissy got a reputation of being really difficult.
Yep.
Mainly because she just had an opinion.
Which is probably just standing up for her rights that
Absolutely.
People didn't expect women to do, which is sad but true.
Yeah, 1982.
Yeah.
And she was quite worldly. She'd been around, and she could be quite aggressive, especially after drinking a bit.
Yeah.
And you go to those pubs, and someone, some guy would be up the front. This was at the beginning of the band. People learnt pretty quickly not to do this. They get up the front and they'd sort of say, "Hey, show us here," whatever. And she'd just dive in the audience.
Yeah.
And then there'd be this sort of thing going on in the crowd, and one of us would have to get in and drag her out, and she'd be sort of punching someone, usually the wrong person, because she was blind. She would usually attack the wrong person. But, she was, she'd be up on the PA, and she'd be pouring water over herself. And, I mean, amazing.
And there'd be bottles thrown and all that, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it was all glass.
Yeah, it wasn't the plastic after 10 or whatever. Yeah.
I can remember playing in Blacktown one night and watching a glass. Someone had smashed a MIDI glass, and it was like slow motion. It's coming up over the crowd, hit me on the chest.
Yeah.
And I said, someone's just thrown a glass at me. And she just stopped the show and said, "Who's that?" And the crowd turned on the guy. The guy was trying to get out, and the crowd turned on him,
wild times.
It was wild, and it was exciting. It was tiring, and then we we became very close. We became very protective of one another, and
because it is a tight little group, isn't it?
Mate.
And I would imagine and especially in those times, you were travelling and just doing one gig after another, just rolling through the towns.
Yeah. And we had many interesting nights. I mean, when we'd drink a lot and take a lot of drugs at the time, and we were in Canberra one night on a Tuesday night, 2:00 in the morning after playing, and this is in the early 80s, and Chrissy says to me, "Let's go out and find a place to drink." So we go to this horrible, one of those late night disco places, and we're both sitting there, and we've got a jug of bourbon and Coke. It's just horrible. And we're both sitting there drinking, and we're trying to outdrink each other. And this DJ, he was up in a booth, they'd be up in a booth. He says, "I'd like to dedicate this next song to a very special lady in the audience, Miss Chrissy Hind from the Divinyls."
Oh, no, that would have said it right.
And, she looked at me and she went, "I'll be back in a minute." And she got up and walked across this, those dance floors that flash, and the guy's up there and she's got the jug. Yeah. Oh, no. And she's walking over, and he must have thought, she's coming to
get the name right.
And she threw this jug, and it was like a grenade.
Yeah.
It went on, hit his turntable, bang, glass everywhere. And she comes back and says, "I think we should go." I said, "I think it's a good idea." Ran out of this club, these bouncers sort of threatening us. And that's what it was like. It was fun. It was chaotic. It wasn't, we weren't hurting anybody.
Yeah, it was a simpler time, wasn't it?
It was a simpler time. No internet.
Yeah.
No mobile phones.
Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it? Like, it's all the shit that would have gone down that never gets covered or reported on, or
That's right. And people would go out, they'd go out and have fun, go to, and there'd be fights. I mean, we used to see violence every night, and we, what would happen with us, with the crews, you'd be playing, and the road crews would be there to protect you, because some guy's girlfriend has smiled at one of us.
Yeah.
So they'd be waiting out the back.
You would have that. I could just imagine it. Like, yes, we'll go to and why were you looking at the bass player, or why were you looking at this? Yeah.
And the crews would sort of, get us to the cars, and there'd be, Yeah, it'd be pretty scary some nights.
What were the drugs about? Was that to loosen up or to come down? What was it? What was your use of the drugs?
We never really sort of did the drugs before we went on stage.
Yeah, you were saying that the other day, and it's probably a misconception that we all think that you get up there, but you said no, we had to be tight. You're playing in a band, and you couldn't do the drugs or get too heavy in the alcohol before you went up there.
Well, the different drugs, like cocaine, a drug like cocaine, we started to do that a bit, I suppose. When we went to America, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
But the heroin thing, which had started for me then, about 1982, I was very, very, very scared about anybody finding out about that.
Yeah, what was that about? Is that because
it's a stigma,
you would have been doing the other drugs in front of each other?
Absolutely.
And that was no drama, but you hid the heroin.
Oh, yeah, it was a big stigma about heroin.
Yeah.
A big misconception. People think, you say I'm taking, if you're on heroin, they grab their wallets.
Yeah.
Or they lock up their video machines or whatever, But
and were you injecting or smoking?
Not then. Yeah. Not then. And I wasn't doing it all the time then. But it was there. It was there. And when I could, I would do it. It was very, very available for me. Yeah. Not so much when I go away, and that's probably, like I said, it saved me a bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to, you're in Bathurst.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday night and try and score
where's the local deal? Yeah.
And people look at you a funny way when you ask them for it. But
and especially because I would imagine you'd move as a group with the band, so it would be hard for you to slip away. And but where are you going? We've got the grog here. We've got the drugs here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And look, what I've learned about addiction is that it kills your spirit.
Yeah.
And my spirit was all about playing music, being obsessive about playing music, loving playing music, loving being part of the thing. And the addiction kills that.
Yeah.
And it started to take all of that stuff away for me,
When did you realise that it was starting to become a problem? And look, with drugs, and we've talked about it on here with so many people whose lives have been destroyed by drugs and that. A lot of people at start think, well, that's for everyone else to get addicted. I'm in control. When did you realise that it was controlling you rather than?
Well, we went in 1982. We went to the States and made an album. We lived there for 5 months.
Yep.
In Manhattan. I'd never been anywhere.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, there's we had 3 apartments, and
so this was the whole band over there.
Yeah. I mean, amazing opportunity.
It would have been.
And we, Crocodile Dundee was just out, and Men at Work were big, so Aussies were.
You're the flavour of the month.
Yeah, it was great, and everywhere you'd go, you go into a bar, and people would have the little brown bottles of Coke, and they'd put it out on the bar.
Yeah,
it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And we really took to that. And it was, we'd never been anywhere, I mean, it was amazing, people, it was an eye-opener. And so when we went back on a tour the next year in 1983.
Tour America.
Yeah.
Yep.
A long tour, 6-month tour. And it was funny because we went to New Zealand first.
Yeah.
I got to New Zealand and I had the flu.
Yep.
I'm like, this is... And same with our drummer.
Yeah.
Who, funnily, both of us used together.
Yeah.
Right? We both got the flu. We're like, this is bad. And I realised it wasn't the flu.
Yeah.
It's coming off the
down.
And the next few years, whenever I'd be back in Sydney, I'd be using it, and I noticed quite a few people died.
Yeah.
My social scene and my friends, and
well, that was a part of the trade of heroin, wasn't it? People were dying from it.
And it's terrible.
I remember my early times in police. You'd be called out one after another, an OD. Someone had shot up and too much for them. But
but like I said, I was kind of saved in a way because I kept we travelled so much.
Yeah.
So, I'd go away and I'd be sick for a week,
Yeah.
but then I'd just drink.
Didn't allow you to get into a habit,
No.
daily habit type thing. But I'd ask you this because I think other people listening would be thinking, like, rockstar, you've made it in your own country, you're over in the US, you've made a record, you're touring the US.
Why would you want to?
Why did you need anything else?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'll try and answer that. See, I think addiction is a spiritual problem.
Yeah.
It's an emptiness.
Yeah.
In my life, I know that playing music was enough for a while, but by the time of the Divinyls came, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And the heroin seemed to make life enough. In here, the emptiness, there's always this empty void. I'm not religious at all, but some people call it a God-shaped hole. You're trying to find meaning or purpose, or
yeah,
and you think certain things will fill you up.
Yeah,
drugs, success, money. Never made much money, but money, women, sex.
Yeah,
whatever it is, you think it's going to somehow make you feel full as a person, fulfilled as a person. And I think all of us are just trying to feel okay in themselves. And I just wanted to feel okay. And without drugs, I couldn't feel okay. And I got to a horrible place where without the drugs was worse.
Yeah.
Felt worse.
That's where it's tipped over.
Oh, mate, it was terrible. And, I'd go away. My family lived up in Queensland. I go up to Queensland. You get a suntan in Queensland, so you look good, and then physically I'd kick back after a week or whatever. I'd tell my mum, I've been working too hard. I've got the flu or whatever. And then I'd just be just everything was grey and slow and boring, and it was like a penance or something,
So you couldn't get the high even performing in the band at your top of your game in front of an audience that's loving everything you're doing, and you're still walking off there as a shell.
Broke my heart.
Yeah,
broke my heart, and as they call addiction a progressive disease.
Yep.
If it's a disease or whatever it is, but it's progressive. It gets worse. And with the best intentions, it got worse. The promises to family and friends to stop.
Well, you were saying even you put the bites on a friend for some money.
Because,
and where you were not mega rich, but you had money coming in, but you spent it on the drugs.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not like I didn't have that. So, you hear about that. The millionaire rock stars who put everything up their nose. It wasn't like that for me. I would, and the money that we were earning in that band was not great.
Yeah.
And maybe if I was getting a wage of say $300 a week or $200 a week.
Yeah.
And I'd go, okay, well, I've got $50 worth of dope, and then. Then I'd go, oh, well, I've got 150 left.
Yeah.
I reckon if I can get one other deal of dope, I can get by on 100. Then it'd be like, oh, I've got $50 left, and then it'd all go.
It's gone.
And then you'd get sick.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to try and, keep everyone away. And a friend of mine.
So I'm curious how the band didn't twig to it. Was that it just covered up with the other drugs or whatever?
I mean, it was the Divinyls. It was like a whirlwind what was going on. It was always drama going on, something going on.
Yeah.
We're always really busy. And, I was like Chrissy said, I lost my voice in the band. I stopped talking.
Right. So you were there, but not really present.
Yeah. And it was all about what I could get away with without being found out.
You become very skilled at it.
Really skilled.
Yeah.
Really skilled at it. And, I started to think, well, this is a problem. it's becoming a problem, and I've got to try and find a way out. And I tried a lot of ways. A psychiatrist, going to see a psychiatrist. I tried going to a church, going to churches. I tried getting fit, tried being a vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I became a fit vegetarian junkie, basically.
With a suntan when you got to Queensland.
A suntan, that's right. You know, and it was bad, you know, it was...
But look, there's no, you don't take kudos for being addicted, but I give you kudos for identifying that you needed to make that change, because the lifestyle you were living and the history is littered with it, that you just keep on that path until one day you wake up one day you don't wake up.
Mm.
So you had enough. Did you have anyone that you could confide in? Is anyone there to help you, or was it just a really personal secret?
Rob Hurst knew.
Yep.
I had a couple of family friends who I told. There were people in the music industry who were doing the same thing as me, so they knew. Yeah. I can tell you a funny story about that if you like. We were this was right at the end for me.
Yeah.
We'd gone away. This is like 1986. We'd done this long tour with Aerosmith in America. Come back to Sydney, and it was just on. It was just chaotic, you know. And then we'd gone to America. Chrissy and Mark and I had gone over there to make a new album.
Yep.
And you know, it's funny. You know, get to Los Angeles, and the record company give me this apartment, and it's nice. It was in a Oakwood apartment sort of thing, and they gave me a car. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Look, there's a great pool, and there's a gym, and there's all this. I reckon I went in the pool once in 3 months.
Yeah.
You know. And Chrissy and Mark were living in another place, and so I was I'd had a contact in Los Angeles, and just before mobile phones, so it was complicated.
It would have been, yeah.
You had to ring and say, I'll be on the corner of such and such at such and such a time, and it became the most important thing.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine puts it a really good way. He says, you know, you've got a balloon full of water and it gets a hole in it. And so you put one hand up on the hole and it gets another hole, and then another hole, and you're trying to stop this, you know, and you're forgetting who you've lied to and what story you've told that person. And
just the chaos that you've created.
Oh, mate. No, I got back. We came back to do this tour, and it was called Australian Made. Yeah. And it was Jimmy Barnes, In Excess, us, Mental as Anything, The Models, the Saints, and it was one of the first, not the first, like big day out thing that toured around Australia.
Yep.
And the gig in Sydney was at Endeavour or Shark Park.
Yeah.
Cronulla, in February, middle of summer. I've gone out there, and by then, what I was doing was, if I had lucky enough to have some dope, I'd have a tiny little bit, just to make myself feel normal.
Yep.
It wasn't about partying or being out of it. It was just about being able to function and communicate, and, you know.
Yeah.
So I get out there, and I'm like, I hadn't thought it through at all. I get out there, and there's just a whole lot of demountables backstage. There's nothing there, right? So I'm like, oh, shit, how am I going to do this? And I mean, I don't want to be too graphic, but, you know, using needles by then, it's a bit of a process. So I go into a Portaloo.
Yeah.
It's pitch black in the Portaloo. I'm in the Portaloo. It's like 120 degrees inside the Portaloo. I mean, it's boiling hot. I'm in the Portaloo, and, you know, trying to do this, get this thing together, and I have this, shot. I opened the door, and the air came in, and I blacked out, fell out of the Portaloo on my face.
Yeah, on
the grass, and I've sort of come to, and I look up, and there around me is probably 2/3 of the Australian music industry.
Oh, no. Okay.
And they're all going, Rick, you all right? And I jump up and I say, all good, thanks. Great.
Nothing to see here.
Thumbs up. Nothing to see here. And I remember walking away going, shit, that was close. I nearly got found out. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it
ridiculous.
Is. Yeah, when you look back with a clear head and you're looking back at that. So,
well, I love gallows humour, mate. They call it. You know, when you can look back
Yeah.
And you can see the ridiculous, selfish stuff that you do, but it's funny.
Well, it's good to get that perspective.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where you decided, okay, I've got to call time on this, and you made a big decision, huge decision. Tell us about that.
So in 1987, I had a girlfriend. Well, I had a hostage basically, and I put her through just hell, just terrible. And she really cared about me, and
she was trying to help you, thinking you'll be better, and you're making promises you can't keep. And,
all that, terrible. And basically, I had this moment where, I had this moment of clarity. I talked to you about the other day about shooting up on stage, and before I went on stage, and there was blood coming out, and that's what made me want to do something. I tried all these things on my own to try and stop, or best intentions, and
it wasn't falling face first out of the portaloo. It was,
or overdosing and walking back to your dealer's house the next day, going, "Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Is crazy."
It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's then I realised I was in the grip of something bigger than me. And so, I got confronted, basically. It was like an intervention.
Yeah.
And my stepfather took me to a place in La Crosse. It's a methadone clinic. And it was the first time I was honest. They said, "Well, how much are you using?" And I said it. I said, "I'm using regularly, and I'll $100 a day if I can," and blah, blah, blah.
Before you basically lying to yourself or anyone that asks, I don't use it much. It's just socially.
No, that person over there uses a lot more than me.
Yeah.
Or they drink.
Yeah, that's the delusional part of it, isn't it? That you're deluding yourself.
Yeah. Look, that time, there are a million stories, I like to say sometimes I got to know a lot of the really good toilets around Surrey Hills and Darlinghurst intimately. I knew the good ones to go to, but when that thing happened on stage and I saw that blood on my arm, and I just thought, this is I was shattered, this is my dream of playing music.
Yeah.
So I went and told my mum about it, and I'd come back to Sydney and I got confronted on my behaviour. I was sneaking around doing all this stupid shit, and I got sort of caught out.
Yeah.
Because of course I'd lied about the extent of my using, and at the time I thought, and the pressure. There was this sort of pressure of the band, and there was a lot of madness in the band, and it was when AIDS was really happening, and our manager, he has an incredible story where he lost his wife through AIDS, and that was all happening, and so I went to this drug counsellor in La Crosse, and they sent me to a place called McKinnon, which is a detox out at Rozelle, and I always laugh about this because I'm so fortunate that it was this time, because in Sydney, the hospitals used it's called 12-step recovery based.
Yes.
So it wasn't about, it was total abstinence, which when they first told me that, I thought that was outrageous. I mean, I loved taking drugs. I loved what drugs did. I loved the feeling of alcohol and drugs. I hated what went along with it, And it took me a while to realise I couldn't not have one without the other. I can go and use drugs, but bad stuff's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And so I'd gone there, and probably the most valuable thing I can say about that is I went there and I was introduced to another way in that detox.
Yep.
And people came in, they did talks in the detox. We were taken out to 12-step meetings in the detox. I'm sitting there going, oh no, it's come to this. My life's come to this. This is, I'm going to be in the Bondi Junction Mall selling Bibles for the rest of my life in a little suit. That's what's going to happen to me.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's exactly right.
So with the band, had you've gone there, you've seen what you're going to have to do to straighten yourself out. Had you told the band?
Yeah. So I told the band. I said, look, I'm basically a heroin addict, and they, it shocked them.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought I'm just going to have to go to the country for a month or something, and think my way out of it.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. And I had no idea what I was up against, but I resigned from the band.
So that would have been
terrible. But at the time, I was just like, I just want everything, the noise to stop.
Yeah. But just this chaos of the life that you've created because of your drug abuse.
Yeah.
And then the thing that you've worked your whole life, your passion, you're part of this tight group that's, probably at their peak, and you've said, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but by then it was just about having a job and getting money for it.
Yeah, yeah.
You said
you lost your soul or passion with the drug use.
Awful. And, it was funny. I went to this hospital, and my first day there, I mean, I was sick. I get there, I'm sick, and I'm physically sick, and I'm sitting there in this pair of old men's pajamas that they had given me, and shaking, and, and this counsellor's talking to me. And I'd travelled around the world, mate. I'd met Mick Jagger. I'd, done all this.
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of arguing with her.
Yeah.
Because she's sort of saying to me, this is what you're going to have to do. And I'm arguing with her. Oh, I'm different, And she said to me, all those great ideas that you've got, how are they working out for you?
Yeah, that's a good guy. It's
pretty good.
On you. Yeah.
And so what happened over the, for me, I mean, no one had ever spoken to me like that.
Had at that point in time, because you got some other news, didn't you? That the band had, was that around the same time?
Yeah, that was just after that. I thought when I was that week in that detox, I saw that there was a possibility, to live without.
Okay.
Drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I in the meeting, they took us to these meetings, and people who came in and talked. I saw it. And I went home. I said, this is fabulous. And I was 10 days sober. It was like, wow, I feel great. And I went home, and this is going to be really good. And then I woke up one morning. It was like, I could go up the road and buy some dope.
Yeah, so you hadn't kicked it.
Yeah, and this is the basis of it. But there were no mobile phones then, and people give you their phone numbers in the meetings and say, when you get out, ring us and we'll go and have coffee, and we'll, So I've got all these phone numbers. So I've got my dealer's phone number. I thought, why would I want to ring any of these people up?
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. I'm going to go and do this. They'll just try and talk me out of it.
Yeah.
But this time, I'll keep it really secret,
I'm seeing your brain, the cogs tick over in your brain, how clever you were beating this. Hey, we might take a break here, and I hate to leave you at this bad point because we've just got that you're at the low point of your addiction, trying to kick it. You've left the band and moved on from there. We'll take a short break, and I'd encourage people to come back and listen to the second part, because if you leave just this first part, you think this is that sad tale of this former rock star that's just lost his life to drug addiction. But there's some good stuff to come in the second part, how he turns it round. So we'll just have a short break now.